It's finally elite season, which means we are all about to understand the men's code of points that much better. I have so much to catch you up on. For those new here, I'm Kensley, the host of Neutral Deductions, a podcast all about men's gymnastics. This is episode 58, where I preview Winter Cup, Cottbus, and recap Elite Canada, and so much more.
This is the Neutral Deductions podcast, men's gymnastic news, coverage, and analysis.
I am going to go into a little bit of what happened in the NCAA last week, very abbreviated, just because we have so much elite news to get into. So OU remains number one in the NCAA after a nail biter with Michigan. Now, it wouldn't have been quite as much of a nail biter if the judges had actually done their job and counted Fred's fall on still rings. Super bizarre. His knee definitely went down. I don't know how they missed it. And rings judging this year across the board has been really quite poor and very odd. This is not going to fly at NCAA championships, so I think a lot of people are going to be in for a rude wake-up call when they actually get their scores at NCAAs and find out that it's going to be like 3 to 5 tenths lower. So just a little bit of an odd meet there. It was good to see Frederick and Paul Judah back in the lineup a good bit more, and I think Michigan has a lot more to give, but they're just not quite there with the current lineup at pace with OU. Now, in looking at top scores from last week, like I mentioned, OU definitely in the lead. They got a 327.7, which led the nation last week. Caleb Palacio of Springfield is leading the all-around from last week with a 76.6. Now, that's not a score that we're going to see lead the all-around at the NCAA championships, and a lot of the top guys were not doing all-around this past week, but it's still really encouraging to see him at the top of that board. Charlie Larson is remaining king over floor. He leads the nation and also led last week's standings with a 14.3. The score was a little bit high from my perspective. I don't think that they got the D score quite right for him. There, again, with the new code of points, like there's just little D score errors all over the place in the NCAA right now. So just something to keep an eye on. Ignacio Yockers of OU led Pommel Horse with a 14.45. Paul Judah of Michigan led Still Rings with a 14.25. Connor Barrow of William and Mary, 14.5 on vault. So William and Mary, not typically a school that you hear having athletes in the conversation for national titles. Connor is an athlete that I think could actually take that national title, just depending on some of the other vaults that are going to be performed. It's incredibly clean, his Yurchenko 2.5. And I got this stat from Christian Marsh, who is a friend of the podcast and is going to be on to help recap Winter Cup for us, and was also a William and Mary gymnast. But if the code of points had not changed the vault D score, Connor Barrow would be tied for the school record at William and Mary on vault. So very cool stat for him. Frederick Richard was leading on both parallel bar and high bar from this past weekend. A little bit of sad news is that JT Okada, who's been the coach at Cal for the past couple of years, is moving to a compliance role at Cal. Interesting move. I don't know if this is to do with like job security and worrying about the future of the NCAA. Nothing has been said on his end, but he will no longer be the head coach at Cal. Now, moving on to Elite Canada, a lot of the Olympians chose not to compete in this competition. And it's really unclear how this is going to affect national team selection. So anyone who's been following me from like my days in gymnastic and just like knows me really well knows I love to read documents. Now, I have read the Canadian documents for selection of national team, and nothing is clear. Now, I give the USA a lot of trouble because I think that they could continue to improve their documents, but compared to the Canadians, like the Canadian documents look like children's scribble comparatively to the US documents. Like the US documents are fairly clear, even though I do have a few complaints later on. But it just seems like the athletes and the coaches don't understand what is required of them to make national team. And we know that there are two competitions that feed into the national team selection for Canada, Elite Canada being one of them, but it's unclear how much. And what about the Olympians who chose to skip? And what about gymnasts like William Amard, who needed to pull out due to injury, or Yanni Chronopoulos, who pulled out day 2 due to being sick? Like, how does this all plan? So I would love to see a little bit more clarity from from Gym Canada about what it's going to take to actually make this national team. So Alel Baker won Elite Canada. He's a relatively unknown gymnast, so one to watch in the future. A couple of familiar names, especially to the U.S. audience. So Aiden Lee of Cal won Pommel Horse ahead of Jason Rampersad and Zachary Clay. Very interesting. So good for him. And then Matteo Bardana, who is part of that senior next generation. Think of it as the equivalent of maybe like this athlete for the senior development team here in the US. He won 4 titles, including the all-around. So well done to them. The Welsh Championships also happened this past weekend. So there are 2 categories of the Welsh Championships. There's those for the Welsh gymnasts, and then there's also an open category where other people can compete as well. Jacob Edwards won the closed category with a 76.734, and Hamish Carter won the open with a 77.701.
Neutral Deductions recently launched and is entirely funded by listener contributions. If you'd like to support the show and help promote men's gymnastics, kindly consider making a donation through the PayPal link provided in the show notes. All donations are greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Moving on to Winter Cup, they have added again a few more gymnasts. So this has just been like the rotating list of athletes competing. It has changed more than any other roster that I can remember. So Fuzzy Bennis was pre-qualified, and then he was withdrawn because he had an injury, and now he's been added back into the competition, and he'll be competing on 2 events. I think probably the highlight for this meet is going to be Frederick Richard in the all-around. Most of the Olympians are not competing, nor are the 2 traveling Olympic alternates, and that's because they were given a pass directly onto the senior national team till the championships later this year. So Frederick is the only one who's competing. I did have it confirmed by the Michigan staff that he is going to be doing the all-around. Now, there's been a lot of buzz around Frederick, and that is because he is planning on debuting a new type of leotard or kit or whatever sort of terminology that you use. And I had been told ahead of time that he was going to receive some deductions for this kit, but no one has seen what this is going to look like. And if you haven't heard, go to his Instagram page, and he talks all about his reasoning behind why he's wanting to be innovative in this area. And he was bullied growing up, and he feels like the leotard is really uncomfortable and wants something that's more modern and more comfortable. So I have verified and checked with the judges, because he posted something about he was going to have to work really, really, really hard to try and make up for the deductions that he's going to receive. And I was like, well, how many deductions is he going to get for this leotard? So I have had it confirmed from the senior judging override panel that what's going to happen is he's going to get a 0.3 neutral deduction on the first event that he competes both days. So assuming he wears a leotard or kit that is not in compliance with FIG regulations, then he will get at maximum a 6/10 deduction over the 2 days of competition. Now, I think that Frederick is probably ahead enough of the game that 6/10 is going to make things tighter, but he still should absolutely be the favorite in the all-around going into this competition. And again, he has already secured his spot on national team. It doesn't really matter what he does. I'm sure he cares about his gymnastics, but this is more about the statement of the clothing and sort of getting feedback and seeing if this can make a real change. Now, the other athlete I really want to highlight for the all-around is Taylor Burkhart. Taylor has been unbelievably consistent this year. It's like he has found this new motivation like within himself. He's a Stanford athlete. He's been on national teams several times. And he has been scoring very well. And I just think he's one to watch. And I think that if Frederick doesn't have particularly good days and he is on par, like I just think he is one to watch. And that's really exciting to sort of, I don't know if using like new blood is the correct term, but it would be, his first time winning the all around at Winter Cup. And that would be really, really exciting. There's a couple other star athletes that we've seen on the national team for a long time, like Colt Walker and Riley Luce. We haven't seen a ton from them this year, and so it's a little bit hard to preview how they're going to fit into the picture. I think Colt Walker is certainly one to throw into that all-around competition, all-around title scenario, assuming he's healthy. It's a little unclear what his status is, but a lot of the faces that we are going to see this weekend are fresh faces, and so a lot of who the future of the U.S. national team could be. Now, about how do you make the senior winter national team? So most of the Olympians, as I mentioned, are skipping. So that's all 5 of the Olympic team members, plus the 2 traveling alternates, plus all 4 senior development team members are completely confirmed on the national team till August. So that's 11 people. So what are the other spots up for grabs? Well, assuming that Frederick Richard doesn't win the all-around because he is already pre-qualified, as long as someone else wins the all-around, and they have the top 3 D score, they will automatically earn a spot onto the senior national team. Now, I don't love this. I don't think it's a horrible rule, but no one, including the athletes or the high performance directing team, know what a good D score is this Olympic cycle. So you're giving people a goal to reach that they have no idea what that goal actually is. The men's program can't even or won't even create a bonus system yet because they don't know what the good D score is. And how can you ask an athlete to be able to predict what a good D score is that's going to get into the top 3? Like, I don't know. I don't love the lack of attainability here. Yeah, I wish that they had just said, if you win the all-around, you get a spot. That's a personal thing. Again, I don't think it's a horrible rule. It's just, for me personally, I don't love it. The next 3 spots are going to go by point total from the men's point system. So that would bring the total number of athletes on the senior national team to 15, and then they are going to have 5 discretionary spots. So the discretionary spots can be added for any number of reasons. They're going to look at like individual event final rankings at Winter Cup. They're going to look at D score from Winter Cup. They're going to look at the needs for international team assignments. So one of the things that can happen out of Winter Cup is they can get international World Cup assignments. And what this says to me is that the point total athletes, like the discretionary spots, are almost certainly going to go to like event specialists would be my, if I had to put money on it, that's where I think that those spots are going. So if I had to guess, you're looking at people like Patrick Hoops, Ignacio Yockers, Parker Thaxton, and Brandon Dang, like that pommel horse crew, which I'll talk about in just a moment. You're looking at people like Taylor Christopoulos for high bar, maybe like a Riley Luce or like a Cam Nelson on floor and vault. And then of course, Alex Diab on rings. Those are kind of the people I think are probably going to get those discretionary spots. But of course, we have to wait and see exactly what is going to happen in the competition. Now, I think the most exciting battle that we're going to see is this 4-way battle for this pommel horse title, right? So Stephen Henderosik already has locked his spot onto senior national team. So I think at maximum, they're going to take one more pommel horse specialist. Even though all of these athletes are phenomenal, I think you probably give the edge to Patrick Hoops. Him and Ignacio have kind of gone back and forth this year, but I think Patrick's routine construction just lends itself to being a little bit more consistent. Ignacio's Busnari, I think he has a lot of form deductions coming up and down. He's really piking up and down, getting into that skill. Parker Thaxton is interesting. He has a very, very nice line. And really any of those four athletes could take that spot. I'm not sure about Brandon's D score and how competitive it's going to be potentially, because they are going to look at D score overall for who sort of fills that spot. And we have seen the men's program say over and over, D score, D score, D score. We're seeing it now as they're only really considering the all-arounder as long as they have this certain D score. So just something to watch and place some emphasis on. Now, the other main event that's going to be happening this weekend is the Cottbus World Cup. So this is the first of 6 World Cups that is happening through the FIG. So the others include Baku, which is in Azerbaijan, Antalya, Turkey, Osijek, Croatia, Doha, Qatar, and then the final event will be in Cairo, Egypt. Now, the World Cup event takes place over several days. So it's a 2-day qualifying event where you have the first 3 events, floor, pommel horse, and still rings on the first day of qualifying. And then you have the second 2 events, vault, parallel bars, and high bar qualifying on Friday. And then you have the respective finals on Saturday and Sunday. So unfortunately, Alivian is not doing or does not have access to stream qualifying, which we had all of last year, which was glorious. We're only getting streaming and live scores for the finals. And of course, we're always thankful for anything we can get. But I really wish that we had access to qualifying, because qualifying is when you see all of the athletes compete, not just the ones that make finals. Now, there is one particular athlete that I really want to draw your attention to. So, of course, we have a lot of the famous names coming back, but there's an up-and-comer who I think can make a really big splash into the senior division, and that's Hamlet Manukian from Armenia. He is pommel horse king. He won European championships as a junior. He won the Junior World Championships, and we found out today that he is sitting in first place heading into the final. So first place after qualifying. So he is making a really smooth transition into the senior qualifying ranks, and he is someone you definitely need to have your eye on. Now, if you would, please rate and review us on Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcast. If you're listening on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It helps others find Neutral Deductions and learn more about men's gymnastics. I had another 5-star review from Emily Gym Fan. She said, quick, concise, and to the point. I have wanted to get into men's gymnastics for a while, but it's hard to know where to start or what to look for. Kensley makes me aware of stories and news that makes the sport more interesting. Thank you for all you do. Thank you. That was such a nice review. And really, I love reading the feedback from everyone who is listening. So thank you so much for leaving that feedback. If you would like to help bring more men's gymnastics coverage to life, please consider donating. A massive thank you to Katie, Phil, and Alana for sending in donations. That enabled us to buy our flight back from Detroit to Denver after the NCAA National Championships. We are almost entirely listener supported at this point, so donations make a huge difference in producing better quality content for you. You can donate via PayPal or Stripe, and the links are in the show notes below. If you have questions, comments, or insider tips, you can email us at neutraldeductions@gmail.com. That's all for this week. We'll see you next time.